In 1363, in the deserts of Central Asia, a minor tribal chief was shot twice, one arrow through his right leg, another through his right hand, costing him 2 fingers. He should have died there. Instead, that crippled young man became one of the deadliest conquerors in human history, and redrew the map from Delhi to Moscow while doing it. They called him Timur the Lame. History remembers him as Tamerlane. He was born in the 1320s near a small town called Kesh, today's Shahrisabz, Uzbekistan, 80 kilometers from Samarkand. His father, Taragai, was a minor noble of the Barlas, a Turkicized Mongol clan with no royal blood and no claim to a throne. That fact would shape everything Timur did next. A century and a half earlier, Genghis Khan had set an unbreakable rule across the Mongol world. Only his direct descendants could hold the title of Khan. Timur was not one of them. Timurid court historians later invented a family tree connecting him to Genghis Khan, but no record from Timur's own lifetime backs it up. He could conquer half the known world, and by Mongol law, he could never be its king. So he found another way in. He married Sarai Mulk Khanum, a genuine descendant of Genghis Khan, and took the title Guragan, royal son-in-law. He would spend the rest of his life ruling as the power behind puppet khans, commanding every army, controlling every treasury, and never once needing the crown to prove it. By 1370, at Balkh, Timur declared himself sovereign after defeating his last serious rival. He was already past 40, old by the standards of his time, to be starting an empire. He would spend the next 35 years making up for the late start. In 1379, his armies took Urgench, breaking the independent power of Khwarazm. In 1381, Herat, one of the great cities of Persia, was stormed and left in ruins, its people massacred. It stayed a ruin for over 3 decades, until Timur's own son finally rebuilt it. This was not random cruelty. It was a system. A city that opened its gates was usually spared. A city that resisted paid for every other city that might resist after it. Sultania fell in 1384. Tabriz in 1386 surrendered with barely a fight. Persia, piece by piece, became his, mostly without a repeat of Herat. Mostly. In 1387, Isfahan surrendered peacefully, then revolted against the tax collectors Timur left behind. His answer was to order every soldier in his army to bring back a head. Estimates of the dead run as high as 70,000. The skulls were stacked into towers at the city gates. A Spanish ambassador who rode past similar towers years later described them as piled high enough that one could scarcely strike the top with a thrown rock. He would use the same punishment again in Baghdad and in Delhi. The message reached every city on his route long before his army did. His most dangerous enemy wasn't in Persia. It was north, in the steppe. Tokhtamesh, Khan of the Golden Horde, had once been a man Timur helped put in power. Now he ruled a rival empire on Timur's northern border, and he wanted more of it. In 1391, the two armies met at the Kondurcha River, and Timur crushed him, pinning Tokhtamesh's forces against the Volga. Tokhtamesh came back for a second round. In 1395, at the Terek River, Timur finished the job, then marched on and burned the Golden Horde's own capitals, Sarai and Astrakhan, to the ground. Trade routes that had run through those cities for a century never fully recovered. Within decades, the Golden Horde itself had splintered apart. In 1398, Timur turned toward India, the richest region he had ever invaded, and in his own justification, not properly Muslim enough for his taste. It took his grandson 6 months to starve out the fortress city of Multan. Then the road to Delhi lay open. On December 17th, Delhi, one of the largest cities on Earth at the time, was sacked. Its population was enslaved or killed. Timur didn't stay to rule it. He took what he wanted, left the Sultanate of Delhi broken behind him, and turned west again, already planning his next war before this one was finished. In 1400, Aleppo fell, then Damascus, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. Its craftsmen were spared and marched 1,000 miles back to Samarkand, because Timur wasn't only conquering. He was stripping every city he took for the artisans who would build his own capital into the most beautiful city in Asia. Baghdad, which he had already sacked once in 1393, was sacked again in 1401. An estimated 20,000 people were killed, and skull towers rose there too. Then came his last great rival, Bayezid I, Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, the man besieging Constantinople itself, the terror of Christian Europe. On July 20th, 1402, outside Ankara, Timur destroyed Bayezid's army and captured the Sultan himself. Bayezid died in captivity. For a moment, the empire that would one day end the Byzantine Empire had been humbled, not by a European king, but by a warlord from a small town in Central Asia that most of Bayezid's own court had never heard of. By 1404, at Tiflis, the kingdom of Georgia had submitted to him. Timur was past 70. He had spent 35 years in the field and never lost a major battle. He wasn't finished. His next target was the largest empire on earth, Ming China. In January 1405, in the middle of winter, he marched out with an army of over 200,000 men. He was already sick, carried part of the way in a litter. Fever or plague, historians still aren't certain which, caught up with him first. He died at Otrar on February 17, 1405, 300 kilometers from where his army had set out a month earlier, and still 1,500 kilometers short of the Chinese border. His empire didn't survive him for long. Within a generation, it had split among his descendants, fought over in wars he never lived to see. But what he built in Samarkand outlasted the fighting, the Guri Amir, the mausoleum where he was eventually laid to rest, and a wave of art, astronomy, and architecture that historians now call the Timurid Renaissance. And his bloodline outlived his empire by centuries. 5 generations later, his descendant Babur crossed into India and founded the Mughal Empire, the dynasty that would one day build the Taj Mahal, ruling the very subcontinent Timur himself had only ever raided for the next 300 years. He never held the title of king. He never reached Ming China, and he never took the whole of the Ottoman world. And yet for 35 years, from the Bosphorus to the Ganges, the map of Asia bent around wherever Timur decided to point his army next, and the empire his descendants built on top of the wreckage would go on to outlast him by 3 more centuries.